I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin'. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo. Good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet or on Pacifica stations, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and for the next hour, my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood,
and I will be bringing you an hour of intensely informative radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you and your wealth, your health, your happiness, and the happiness of your friends and families and co-workers, and the health and happiness of gray squirrels and red squirrels and brown squirrels.
And black squirrels too.
And even flying squirrels.
Oh my goodness.
And pretty much every sort of squirrel, and tree and owl and hawk and everybody and everything else. Because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together here on this fantastic planet called Earth. And we have a fantastic show for you today. We're going to just chat for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we have an interview with Cathy Cowan-Becker. With her, we're doing something a little unusual this week. Usually we try to bring you a heads up on environmental issues and legislation. So we try to get stories in about bad environmental legislation before they happen. But this week we're going to do a deep dive, a post-mortem on a terrible piece of legislation called State Bill 219 that Ohio's Governor DeWine signed into law a few weeks ago. We did report on this a little bit in the past, but this is the law that sacrifices Ohio's state park system to the oil and gas industry. After that, we'll hear from our patrons who make this show possible and to whom we are eternally grateful. And then, Rebecca, it'll be your turn at the mic. What do you have for us this week?
Hookworms.
Oh no.
I'm hoping I don't literally have hookworms, but that may be up for debate.
Oh no.
It's bad.
And this is following the whole segment on parasites we did.
Did we? When did we do that?
Last time.
Oh, okay.
Well, it'll be interesting to listen to.
Yes.
We can be sure of that.
Interesting in the direction of gushy.
And then after that, we'll have ecological news from around the world. That'll be our show. We've been doing this show for 7 years now. In fact, this is our 386th episode.
Wild.
If anyone's counting.
I don't know how that happened.
It's been.
I blame Joe.
It's been a journey.
Yeah.
We've had some stories. There's been some issues that we've covered for our entire run, the entire time we've been on the air. The big one, of course, is global warming. The runner-up would probably be Ohio House Bill 6, which was that seemingly endless source of corruption and the failures of the nuclear industry and the fossil fuel control of legislation and prison and suicide and other general malaise for the future. And of course, that story is still going on as the state of Ohio is preparing a retrial in the case of the former CEO of First Energy, the company that paid out $65 million in bribes to get the corrupt House Bill 6 legislation through. But one other story we've talked about quite a bit throughout the years was Bowling Green's, Ohio's penalty on having rooftop solar panels. Way back in 2019, not coincidentally, the same year our household installed solar panels on our roof, the city of Bowling Green established a $4 per installed kilowatt per month penalty utility charge on the panels and slashed the reimbursement rate for the electricity from those panels from 10 cents per kilowatt hour down to 5 cents. Well, there was great rejoicing in our household this week because our utility bill came. And with it, the receipt of a recent decision by Bowling Green. It has finally abandoned the solar panel penalty. This month, the reimbursement rate went back up to 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and the penalty was cut in half from $4 per installed kilowatt hour to $2, and then in January 27, it'll disappear completely.
Bowling Green might in many ways be the Ohio that you were warned about.
It's been a sticking point for me personally. They do pretend to be green.
Right,
a couple years ago, there was a branding attempt by Bowling Green to be called a green city, but at the same time, they do this thing with solar panels. So.
Yeah.
For 7 years, Leatra Harper, who was a local woman who owns one of the largest solar electric systems in Bowling Green, alongside the Wood County Green Party, BG Song, and this show for a Green Future, along many others as well, have been fighting this penalty. There have been petitions, countless city council and municipal utility board meetings with the mayor and the director of public utilities, and many reports drafted by the opponents of this penalty that showed over and over again there was no rational basis for this policy. The city kept claiming that solar panel owners had to be penalized in order to make them pay their fair share of the costs of maintaining the city's poles, wires, and transformers. But first of all, there's literally a handful of people doing that, so I don't know about that loss. But second, of course, when solar supporters actually looked at the numbers, just the act of generating the cheap power that didn't need to pay transmission costs and that didn't cost the city any additional money in terms of delivery, just that, the city already made a handsome profit off of every kilowatt hour generated by rooftop solar.
And you did sort of pay your fair share when you paid to have the panels put in,
Yeah, well, they don't care about the cost to the homeowner.
Or logic, or
Yeah, the boosts to local economy. We don't do that sort of thing.
No.
Supposedly, what prompted the actual decision reversal was a cost of service study produced by a consultant the city had hired. That study just so happened to prove every point that the solar power supporters had been making for the past 7 years. We have no way of knowing if that's the whole story or if the constant political pressure and threat of a lawsuit by Leatra Harper was a larger factor, but we think it probably was. If that case had actually gone to trial, then all the facts and figures that the solar panel penalty opponents had gathered over the last 7 years would have come out under oath in the witness stand. The numbers don't lie. Rooftop solar does make electricity cheaper for everyone, and it shaves the peak off of peak usage during the hottest part of summer days. And it is that peak usage that is the highest number of megawatt hours a given regional grid uses. That's what sets the base price of electricity for everyone. In other words, once a grid hits a record high amount of power, the capacity to generate that much power has to be in place and available permanently. So even if the grid were never to hit that peak again, there would still have to be generation sources like gas-burning power plants on standby, just idling, ready to start generating enough power to hit that peak again. And it's those costs of keeping all that energy generation on standby that sets the base price of electricity for everyone. Solar panels produce the most power during the hottest, sunniest days, and it literally shaves the top of that peak off. In fact, in grids with very high solar solar panel penetration. So many
But does it help with alliteration at all?
Apparently not.
Darn.
That's a hidden benefit of having solar panels. You get to practice your tongue twister.
Yay.
There's so much energy generated by an electricity grid with many solar panels that instead of a peak, you actually have a trough in electricity demand.
Wow.
The total demand from the grid drops because the panels are producing so much power behind the meters at individual households.
Cool.
And that's the truth of rooftop solar. Unfortunately, many of our lawmakers don't seem to be interested in the truth. They seem to be more interested in the huge donations that they can get from corporations. On July 21st, New York Times ran a story called "Why States Are Making It Harder to Save Money with Solar Panels" by Francesca Paris. It turns out that state legislators around the country are passing laws that copy Bowling Green's bad policy. They're making exactly the same false claims about the costs of maintaining the poles, wires, and transformers.
Also, I went to junior high school here, which proves that it's evil.
What? Is there a story behind that? Or?
Probably a whole series, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that New York Times article is written from the perspective of electric utility companies. It calls one of solar power's greatest strengths, the fact that it generates power in the middle of the day, a problem. Utilities are using this strength of solar power against it in order to eliminate net metering. Instead, they're implementing something called net billing, which basically just means underpaying solar owners for the electricity they put back onto the grid. Arkansas is one of the examples they give in the article where utility companies convinced legislators to let them cut the amount they pay for solar electricity from 12 cents per kilowatt hour down to 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Francesca Paris, the reporter, doesn't actually look at any of the utility companies' claims to see if they're true, since they are not. Instead, she uncritically repeats what they've been saying. It's very disappointing reporting from the New York Times. Most states, including Ohio, still have net metering, but many states have switched to net billing. It doesn't seem to matter if those states are controlled by Republicans or Democrats. What seems to matter is the degree to which that state legislator is controlled by electric power companies. And let me be clear, this is absolutely a politically neutral stance. It's not the mandate of our elected officials to give aid to any industry. These legislations are intentionally undermining what should be a free and uninfluenced choice for private citizens. California ended its net metering back in 2023. That caused an immediate crash in the solar industry. Tens of thousands of solar installation businesses went bankrupt. California lost its place as the state with the most solar installations to Texas. The move was wildly unpopular, and we can hope that it will cost Governor Newsom his presidential aspirations. The people of California are still fighting that terrible policy change. Let's hope it doesn't take them 7 years to reverse it. The problem is most people don't even know the difference between net metering and net billing, and frankly, they shouldn't have to. The whole reason we have a representative democracy is so that legislators can look at the minutiae of things like energy policy and make the best decisions that benefit the most people.
Also, can we vote to just lock Newsom in a room with a bunch of homeless trans people that his homes he destroyed?
Being educated, yeah.
Yeah.
He has some very troublesome views in a lot of sectors, but he is charismatic. Trump was also charismatic.
Was he really, though? I've never seen it.
My grandma liked him.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know what that says. People can vote. I don't know.
They can.
Our legislators seem to be following the money. Ever since Citizens United allowed corporations the unlimited ability to make donations to political campaigns, politicians have had a powerful incentive to work against the people and for the corporations. In California, before Gavin Newsom sold out the citizens on rooftop power, he sold them out on the issue of keeping the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant open. There had been an agreement in place to close Diablo Canyon, meticulously worked out in excruciating detail. The people, the workers, and even the utility company had all agreed on a process and a date. Gavin Newsom blew all that up and took a $1 million donation from Pacific Gas and Electric.
Heck of a coincidence.
Yeah. His sabotage of rooftop solar is part of a pattern we're seeing repeated around the country. Newsom went from being a supposed champion of renewable energy and an opponent of nuclear power to being a lackey of the Pacific Gas and Electric Corporation. And legally, he's allowed to do that. It feels like it's been a long time since there have been politicians whose primary objective was serving the people. Mandani, I think, is the most recent example. And of course, there's Bernie Sanders. They have their flaws too, but at least they don't seem to be driven by private sectors instead, the public sector.
Hopefully, yeah.
Here in Ohio, our governor, Mike DeWine, has undergone a similar transformation. He has spent most of his time as governor promoting and crowing about Ohio's amazing state park system. In fact, under his tenure, Ohio state parks have been called the best in the country. Unfortunately, all this changed last month when the governor signed State Bill 219. And now, Ohio state parks are literally for sale to oil and gas companies who want to frack them. Our guest in just a moment, Cathy Cowan-Becker, was one of the brave souls who stood up for Ohio's parks and fought State Bill 219 from the beginning. Painful as it is, we felt it was valuable to take a look back at this issue because none of these battles are ever really over until the people trying to protect the environment give up. If the people of Bowling Green had simply accepted the municipal utilities penalty, it would still be in place today. But believe it or not, in a democracy, people's opinions do actually matter, even when it seems like corporations control everything. Opening state parks to drilling and fracking is universally unpopular. State and federal parks have been getting more and more use and visits. People are starving for the benefits of being out in nature, for as long as they can, anyway, these days. And our park systems have literally been the envy of the world. Opening our parks to oil and gas drilling will inevitably lead to spills and groundwater contamination and fires and even explosions if we're very unlucky. When these things happen to our precious parks, there will be outrage, and when that outrage comes, it'll be important to remember who was responsible. The answer, of course, is Mike DeWine and our Republican-controlled legislature.
It's like I always used to say during the lockdown. They call it wine with DeWine because you need something to get through it.
Yeah, I remember that.
The whiny one. Oh, but somebody objected. I can't do anything.
Well, no one fought State Bill 219 harder than our next guest, Cathy Cowan-Becker. Let's go to that interview now.
Hello and welcome back to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and who you're with?
Yeah, my name is Cathy Cowan-Becker. I'm the board president of Save Ohio Parks.
Okay, Cathy. And we're going to be talking today about Senate Bill 219. Usually we talk about these things sort of as they're in the works, but this time it's kind of a post-mortem. I thought it would be valuable to take a look back at what happened to it. So what was Senate Bill 219 and when did it pass?
So Senate Bill 219 was billed as a major overhaul of the law governing oil and gas wells. And it passed just about a month ago. And a lot of the provisions in it, they had tried to slip into the budget bill last year because that budget bill goes through every committee in the legislature, and a lot of legislators slip in their pet things that they want to get done because the budget bill has to pass and it's thousands of pages, so some things get in there and they're not even noticed. So they tried to slip in a lot of the provisions in this bill into that. And Governor DeWine, the governor, has line item veto over a budget bill, anything that's appropriations, and he line item vetoed a lot of those, most of those provisions out of the budget bill. So then they tried again with 219, which was a standalone bill, and this time it made it through both houses and it was sent to DeWine, and he did sign it. Which, we tried to have a pretty strong campaign asking, well, first calling the legislators in these various committees, testifying at these committees. We had people emailing and calling their own legislator to educate them about this bill, and there were a lot of votes against it. It was almost a party line vote, with the exception of, I believe, 2 Democrats voted for it, but everyone else voted against it. Actually, 3 Democrats, 1 in the Senate, 2 in the House. But all of the other Democrats voted against it. But as you know, it's a supermajority Republican legislature, and it passed, and it landed on DeWine's desk, and he did sign it.
So as you say, there was a lot of pushback on this. A lot of people didn't want it. I think mostly because one of the big things it does is it threatens Ohio's parks, Ohio state parks.
Yeah, absolutely. So several of the provisions in it, there's 2 whole sets of provisions that are around fracking of public lands. So one of the first set, I guess, would be the time frame. So to give your viewers and listeners background, there's a commission called the Oil and Gas Land Management Commission that was set up by a previous law. That commission takes what's called nominations from an oil company. So if an oil company wants to frack a piece of public land, they nominate that piece of land. It goes to that commission. That commission holds a hearing. They can either approve it or deny it. In practice, they approve almost all of them. If approved, then it goes out to a bid, and then any company can bid on it. And so then that comes back to all those bids come back to that commission. And another thing they do in those meetings is select which company, if any. Every now and then one falls through, but usually those bids are awarded. And so then they pick the company to get the bid, usually the one that is offering the most amount of money. It's called, in the legal language, highest and best bid. And so once a company is selected, then the agency that manages that land, so that might be OD and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for a park or wildlife area, could be the Ohio Department of Transportation if it's land along a highway. We've even have the Department of Corrections, because they wanted to frack a jail at one point, and they did get that one. So that company or that agency makes the lease with the oil and gas company, and there is a standard lease form, but the agency can ask for other things in that lease, which ODNR regularly does. And then once the lease is signed, it all comes back to ODNR. They have a division of oil and gas resources management that manages the permitting. And the permitting is where all the real details are about, where are you going to get your water? How much water can you use? How deep can you mine? What's that, or can you drill and frack, and what's that going to look like? And what are your drill bits going to look like? Things like that. So that's the process. So it's nominations, bids, leases, permits. There are 4 stages, and every one of those 4 stages, 219, basically massively sped up, cut in half the time. In the first one with nominations, commission now only has 90 days to decide. They used to have 180. With bids, they used to put the bid out just the next calendar quarter. Now they have to put it out immediately. With leases, that lease has to be executed in 30 days. There wasn't a deadline before. And with permits, that permit also has to be, I mentioned, very detailed, also has to be done in 30 days. And there wasn't a time limit before. So that's one set of things that affects fracking in our parks, makes it much faster. And then another set of provisions has to do with a bunch of favors that the oil and gas industry wanted. So, for example, it makes the lease, the initial lease used to be 3 years, and a law increased that to 5 years. Then there was a renewal lease, which used to be 3 years, and 219 increased that to 5 years. So now, once an oil and gas company gets a bid and gets the ability to frack a piece of public land, they can be there for up to 10 years, and actually probably more, because then there's several cases where against the time, like against that deadline, or a shot clock is kind of how they call it in the legislature. They'll take a timeout and it won't count against them. So for example, if they decide to just stop fracking for a while because the market is bad, the prices aren't very high, it's called a shut-in, and they'll just stop fracking a well for a while. Now, because of 219, that doesn't count against that 5-year time frame, and it used to.
So now that lease renewal, that doesn't require approval, right? The company just says, I want another 5 years, and they get it.
Yeah, pretty much. ODNR gives it to them, or whoever the agency is has to give it to them, because they can renew that.
Tell us a little bit more about the oil and gas management board. Who appoints it? Who's on it? It seems to have a lot of power, but it seems like it isn't exercising it to protect our parks.
Yeah, it's definitely not. So it was set up actually by a 2011 law that first enabled fracking of public lands, but there was so much pushback for many years over that law that Governor Kasich at the time just didn't appoint anyone to this commission. Governor DeWine did appoint people, but they weren't meeting until the 2023 law kickstarted this whole process again. But basically it includes 5 members. They're appointed by the governor. The chair is the director of ODNR, or whoever that person designates. Her name is Teresa White, and she's the chief operating officer of ODNR. Then there's by law 2 representatives from the oil and gas industry. And then there's a representative of finance and real estate. His name is Stephen Beerer, and he's been on for a while. He's been a Republican legislator. He's a member of ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Commission. And then there's somebody who's supposed to represent conservation. His name is Jim McGregor. He has held positions at ODNR. He was actually a former mayor of Gahanna. And he's supposed to be the one to work with the public. And he is the only one who kind of answers our emails sometimes if we send them. But he has voted to frack every one of these. And when we asked him why, he said that, well, within ODNR, there are like oil and gas experts that make recommendations, and they have recommended to do this. And so, what this shows is that it's really important who the governor is, because the governor is appointing these people. And basically we've talked to Mary Mertz, the director of ODNR, and also a former chair of this commission, and they've all said the legislature has ordered us to do this. So even though the law clearly states that they can approve or deny, the law clearly states 9 criteria they're supposed to consider, including the comments of Ohioans, the comments and objections is the way it's. And Save Ohio Parks has helped get about over 10,000 public comments on fracking these public lands. We've never once heard them refer to these public comments, talk about them, about what they say. They are 98 to 100% opposed. What the people of Ohio want is really, really clear. They want their parks and their wildlife areas to be preserved. But this commission never talks about that. And some of the other 9 things they're supposed to consider are like the environmental effects, geological effects. Is it compatible to the use of the land, which you frack right outside Salt Fork, and people have camped there and told us they can hear it, they can see it. They've told us that the water there is not good. So we've said it's not compatible. We don't think it's compatible. There have been oil and gas accidents. We did some reporting finding an oil and gas incident or accident in Ohio every 1.5 days. It's very common. It's sometimes like a spill, a leak.
We had a guest on just 2 weeks ago.
Okay, you had Jenny Morgan on, who did that research. You all are familiar with that research.
Yes.
And she probably talked about the explosion at a well pad just right south. Suppose that happened even closer, like there are well pads even closer that are fracking Salt Fork.
And this law now 219 does actually allow fracking in the parks, correct?
Well, so that actually was allowed by the previous 2011 legislation I mentioned. What they would have to do is make a special quote. It's called a surface use agreement, and they'd have to make an agreement with the agency. And ODNR said we're not doing that, but that's because of Mike DeWine. Mike DeWine, when he signed HB 507, the 2023 law that kickstarted all this again. He said he had a signing statement saying no surface use. So there hasn't been pads directly in the parks, but they can be as little as 1,000 feet outside the parks. That's a fifth of a mile. And also there have been articles about the current Senate president and House Speaker speaking to the Ohio Oil and Gas Association and telling them when DeWine leaves, we'll let you have, you'll be able to go inside the parks and telling them that. So we fully expect if Vivek Ramaswamy wins, he has already said he thinks fracking in the parks is great. He called it pro-human and pro-environment. He did a photo op from that frack pad fracking Salt Fork and said that. And he wants, he wants public land to be fracked everywhere. He wants data centers everywhere. We fully expect him to allow, if he were to win, to allow fracking inside.
Has his opponent, has Amy Acton, talked on this topic?
Yeah, Amy Acton and David Pepper have both, are strong proponents of protecting parks and public lands. And they're exploring how legally they could do that, because the Ohio law is the Ohio law. But if they win, then they're the ones who appoint the members of this commission and many other commissions, dozens, if not hundreds of other commissions. And so hopefully, at least we'd have a fighting chance, to point out, here are the 9 things you're supposed to consider in this, when you consider this, and fracking is incompatible with this use. And, so we hope that would happen. Just one more thing about frack pads inside these parks and wildlife areas. Salt Fork is 20,000 acres, and Egypt Valley, which almost all of it has been leased out for fracking at this point. This is Egypt Valley Wildlife Area. It's next to Salt Fork, is 18,000 acres. And so fracking lines from outside can run maybe 3 to 4 miles in, but they can't get to all the oil and gas there without something inside the parks. And so that seems to be why they're so eager to get surface use access. So yeah, that, if they have a governor that will allow them to do that, then they will do that.
Want to just comment on, lately there's been articles talking about how the leases that have already been bid out are raising like $200 million for the state.
Yeah. We actually sent this information to the reporter who broke that story, but he didn't end up using it. Just before they did this, they passed the flat tax. So basically, billionaire Ohioans and wealthy Ohioans are paying the same taxes, like a secretary. Now that didn't used to happen. So Ohio is foregoing billions of dollars of tax money, tax revenue they used to have. And at the time, Matt Huffman, who was House Speaker, said, we're going to make up this revenue with fracking our public lands. That's what, they are fracking our public lands so they can give tax cuts to the rich. That's literally what they did. But it's not even bringing in that amount of money as they're losing in that tax revenue, just billions of dollars. And so, look at where you could be, there are other ways to raise this revenue, like having the wealthy pay their fair share would raise a lot more revenue.
I think DeWine, at least it looked during his tenure as governor, and he's only going to be there another 6 months or so, tried to make preserving Ohio's nature like his legacy. What does signing 219 do to that legacy? Yeah,
it completely undercuts it. It shows that, their constant advertising of our state parks, that's that fair in Washington, D.C. on the Mall. Apparently, Ohio state parks were a big part of the Ohio display there. And they're always bragging how we have the #1 state parks. And yet they're just letting the oil companies do what they want and have at it. And it's like Des Moines says one thing and then does another. This is damaging our state parks, and it will continue to damage our state parks even more, even faster. But, he won't be in office to see that and have to deal with that.
That's about all we have time for. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, there are a couple of other provisions in 219 that were really questionable. There's one that prohibits ODNR from charging an oil and gas company anything more than the costs in the lease. And we brought up, okay, what happens if there's an accident right there, or if they're negligent and they spill a bunch of stuff? Can you charge them for cleanup? And that's really unclear whether the oil company can be charged in that case, fined for that money, or if that would fall on taxpayers. And then another piece is about if there's any sort of lawsuit, and Save Ohio Parks did bring 2 lawsuits about this, then that doesn't count against the 5-year time frame, and they don't have to pay the royalties during that time until such lawsuit is at a final non-appealable order, which conceivably means you might have to appeal it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to get a non-appealable order. So, we brought that up too, but that all made it into that law. So we'll see what happens.
How could people follow what Save Ohio Parks is doing?
Yeah, just join us. Go to our website at saveohioparks.org. There's a tab called Join Us, and if you fill that out, we'll put you on our email list, and you'll get notice of new nominations, of chances to comment on lots of things having to do with energy policy in Ohio, and we'd love to have you.
Well, that was our interview. What did you think? Let us know. Your feedback is invaluable to us. You can send us an email at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org, or send us a text to 419-973-5841, or find us on social media. We'll read your texts or your messages on the air next week. In fact, we got a text from a listener last week. They asked, quote, "Do you have any public transportation in Bowling Green, Ohio? We have public transportation in Youngstown, Ohio, and I use it several times a week. Ever since the pandemic, rides on the Western Reserve Transit Authority buses have been free." Well, here in Bowling Green, we have basically a call for ride system. It is public, and it only operates within the city, and you have to call a day ahead, but the ride will come within the hour that you schedule it. A typical ride costs about $4. Wood County, Ohio, has no county-wide public transit. Perrysburg, the second largest city in Wood County, also has a call-a-ride system. They famously dropped out of the regional transit authority, largely due to the influence of a libertarian on the city council who didn't believe government should provide services like public transportation. Now they're paying more to a private company to do their call-a-ride system, but
Yeah.
and
They also had like a couple of year gap where there was just nothing.
Yes,
They were all, we're going to build our one system. It's going to be so great. They're paying way more for this private system. And there was also a gap where like Toledo was, bringing people on TARTA, just kind of like leaving them in a snowy parking lot in their little wheelchair to wait for the bus to come with no shelter or anything. So that was great.
Yeah, public transportation is, in fact, this is our official stance, is in fact something that the government should provide exactly for situations like that. Most of the other cities on the northern border of Wood County and in the region are served by TARTA, the Toledo Area Regional Transit Authority. And Rebecca, in fact, is our resident expert on TARTA. How would you answer our listener? What do you think about public transportation?
Oh, in Toledo? It's a cruel joke. Essentially. It takes forever, so you're going to be sitting around in the weather forever, unless you can afford to, sit around in a restaurant and have hot beverages or something. And there's an absolute, the war on bus benches is over and we lost.
Yes, yeah. We did report on that, I think, a couple years ago, back when they were making those changes.
Everybody says, get on the paratransit. Well, if you do successfully get on the paratransit, the first thing they do is give you a free regular TARTA bus pass so that you can use the regular buses and not overload the paratransit. You know what would help me do that more? Bus benches, because I have excruciating lower joint pain. And if I have to stand up and wait for the bus after with my groceries, I'm not using that grocery store, which means there are less grocery stores I can use now.
Yeah, it could be improved, but Ohio could be improved, and the United States the world could be improved, I suppose. Well, thanks for that personal insight, Rebecca, and thanks to our listener for that comment, and thank you to our patrons. Our patrons are wonderful people, intelligent, compassionate people who have a love of nature and of humankind, and they're just generally fantastic folks who understand the value of supporting a show like For a Green Future. And all they had to do to become patrons was go to patreon.com, patreon.com. There they searched for a Green Future. And once our Patreon page popped up, they scrolled through looking at the different membership levels and picked one of those levels or even made their own level. And now every month a little bit comes out of their accounts and comes over to us. And that's how we can afford to keep For a Green Future on the air. Thank you to our patrons. Okay, Rebecca, your turn. I'm not sure if I should turn it over to you.
It's going to be scary. Sensitive viewers will want to turn down the volume for a couple minutes here. So this week, a tragic blow has struck our household. Our dog has worms. We're not sure what kind yet. We can't really get her treated till the 25th, but we got a jumped up farm boy staying with us, and he knows what kind of stuff to get with us, to get at the store that you can get for cheaper than going to the doctor. That'll work and not hurt them if it's the wrong kind of worms or something. But the kind of worms it is, in fact, actually we don't know. It could be several kinds. So I decided to look up dog parasites and found hookworms. They're a popular dog parasite. So hookworms are parasitic worms which attach to the small intestines and feed on blood. I didn't know that. I thought they were eating your food or something.
Yeah.
That
would have been my guess.
Yeah, so because of that, they cause anemia, weight loss, and diarrhea. There was some mopping that went on at our house. It wasn't good. And it can be really dangerous to young animals, old animals, weak or sick animals, that kind of thing. They're called hookworms because they have hook-like mouths, which they attach by. And they're transmitted by eating the eggs of the hookworm, skin penetration by larvae, or mother to young through either the placenta or through nursing. And they can affect humans, so that's special. One of the symptoms is an itchy skin rash, and they're diagnosed by microscopic eggs and feces. So yeah, we've been trying to get we're gonna have another appointment, and we gotta arrange things so we keep the little green baggie. Good. That'll be fun, right? So. Yeah, they can also be caused by sitting or rolling on contaminated soil. Our princess is a roller.
Just in the soil. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, because
eating something specific.
She's actually very good about not eating poop for a dog, especially. Yeah. Somebody taught her not to do that, and I'm very grateful to them. Probably for people who had her for the first year of life. But yeah, she likes to sort of sass me by rolling. Like one time sometimes she'll just do it for fun, but other times she does it when I try to turn her around and take her home. No, mommy, let's fight.
Ursula, my dog, likes to roll in tire tracks, especially in winter.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe the smell of the rubber. I don't know.
Something. It's odd, but yeah. So I looked it up, and what is hookworm's place in the greater things of things, other than just being sent by God to torment us or whatever, They have, for one thing, there's some interesting medical stuff going on with hookworms. They may be useful as to give sick people hookworms, and genetically modify them so that they're little drug factories that dispense drugs over the long term over the stomachs.
That could be interesting. That's very gene splicing, high sci-fi fantasy kind of thing.
Yeah, but We're living in a sci-fi fantasy. This is why we have the ice cream of the future.
Yeah.
The future
For the
tastes
past-
like.
I remember that as a child.
Yeah, that's how you know it's the future. The future is sort of tastes a lot like frozen sugared cardboard, but whatever. It turns out. So also there are proteins in hookworm saliva which could treat irritable bowel disease or disorder or whatever it is, and also other autoimmune diseases, according to the other thing about the drug factory thing might be that's Washington University. washu.edu, and the thing about the proteins is from for irritable bowel disorder. That's Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medication thinks this. So in general though, parasites are pretty important to the environment actually, because they regulate host populations really well. It seems kind of mean. It's like, why can't we just, give them all condoms? I don't know. But that it has that effect, which presents single species dominance. It drives biodiversity and evolution, and also it facilitates energy transfer across food webs, which I'm pretty sure means it kills you and redistributes your energy.
Apex predator down to the worms. Kind of redistribution.
Keeps things moving. So they're possibly actually more important than predators in doing that successfully, in maintaining community balance between different members of the animal community. They don't really have a lot of environmental drawbacks, except that people frigging hate them. Nobody likes them. People, animals, everybody hates them.
Yeah.
Nobody likes hookworms. But they also cause cognitive impairment and lethargy, which isn't going to be helpful to humans.
Yeah.
And what are we doing right now? Like, we're making the world hotter and moister when they like really warm, moist, shaded soil. And we're not, like, Alabama has a serious hookworm problem right now because some of the ditches with sewage are overflowing or something, and their kids are walking around barefoot on contaminated dirt. And the way things are headed with what we're doing to the planet, I'm guessing that, and this is what happens in response to global warming and in response to distress in the environment in generally, is that parasites go crazy. We're seeing that all over. Like the new diseases are becoming a serious problem for animals that didn't used to be, And this one could be making your and my future less pleasant potentially because of what we're doing everything to encourage it, basically. Yeah,
I don't see a future where they won't be more common unless there is a future where, in the far future where we're handed our, anti-parasite inoculations once a month by the government or the leader of our survival compound.
There we are, yes. I'm going to try and get into a survival compound with good worm prevention. I don't know about you.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
Now it's time for ecological news. Our first story comes to us from the British medical journal, The Lancet. This is one of the oldest and most respected medical journals on Earth. Everything in it is rigorously peer-reviewed and documented. On July 18th, they ran an editorial by Philip Landrigan and Britta Lundberg entitled The False Promise of Nuclear Power. In it, they tear to pieces a publication by Taha Burkis called The World Report. Taha claimed in her report that nuclear power is safe, clean, and affordable. Philip and Britta's essay basically refutes it completely. In fact, they go so far as to call her report mendacious. In the rarefied world of academic journals, mendacious is a pretty deep cut. In other words, they called her a big fat liar. They made a rapid series of fully researched and cited points about nuclear power. They start with the fact that uranium itself is toxic and is deadly from the point where it's mined through milling and processing and waste reduction and dealing with the deadly radioactive wastes. They also cite a Harvard study that we've reported on before. That study shows that 115,000 cancer deaths in the United States alone since the year 2000 can be attributed to living near a nuclear power plant. Of course, that number is denied by the nuclear industry, but there's no denying that if you live within 5 miles of a nuclear power plant, you can be up to twice as likely to die of cancer. The letter goes on to point that nuclear power is unique in its ability to create global catastrophes. Wind turbines and solar panels can't melt down and permanently contaminate entire regions with radioactivity.
Well, if we get to the point where our nuclear, our solar and wind equivalent is melting, we're going to have bigger problems.
Yes. But even if that happened, they wouldn't, they probably wouldn't be collapsing on houses.
Good point.
You can hope.
Contaminating the whole region for a few million years. I think. Yeah.
The letter also refutes the nuclear power industry's claims that nukes are carbon-free, citing a study that shows nuclear power plants generate 6 grams of CO2 for each kilowatt hour of energy they produce.
Yeah.
That is less than the amounts produced by burning fossil fuels like coal and oil directly, but it's still many times the amount of CO2 produced by wind, solar, geothermal, or tidal energy. And finally, they point out that since 2009, the cost of nuclear power has increased by 47%. In contrast, solar prices have fallen by 90%, wind prices have dropped by 70%, and utility-scale batteries have dropped by an incredible 99% since 2009.
Well, they have to keep replacing the congressmen they bought, who they're done, their elected officials who keep going to prison or committing suicide. Really?
Yeah, that would drive up your costs.
Yeah, come on. What do you want them to do?
If you care about the issue of nuclear power, or if you know someone who needs a little reminder of facts, you should take a look at the letter in the Lancet. Even though it's packed with information, it's only a 2-minute read, but that 2 minutes is plenty to support the conclusion of the authors, who state, quote, "Nuclear power is a dangerous distraction. It is time to move beyond it and invest in renewables."
Hear, hear.
Reading it was a breath of fresh, clean, truthful air in a public sphere which has been heavily polluted by pro-nuclear propaganda. And unfortunately, that is the correct way of describing it. Personally, I had been on the fence for a long time for or against nuclear power. But it was exactly these repeated sentiments that nuclear power has no downsides and is completely safe and the solution is everything that we need right now that made me take a look at, what is actually going on.
Darn nothing, including water, is completely safe. Yeah.
If not for the corruption and the false promises and the deliberate over-budgeting and the health effects and the storage issues, it might have been a usable technology, but it's...
It was great, except for about 20 to 30 serious problems.
Yeah. It would have been nice. Our next story takes us out deep into the Pacific Ocean, off the waters of American Samoa. Our friends at Greenpeace put out a story on July 16th entitled "Trump Administration Launches First Deep-Sea Mining Lease Sale Despite Pacific Opposition." That's a bad thing.
Specific opposition.
Yes.
Specific opposition.
Specific opposition. Back on April 25th, Trump put out a probably illegal executive order saying that the U.S. should immediately begin permitting deep-sea mining. This is not mining in the conventional sense. This is dredging up mineral nodules that grow on the deep-sea bottom.
Great.
These nodules grow at a fantastically slow rate. It's only 1 or 10 millimeters per million years. Some of them have been sitting on the ocean bottom, growing infinitesimally every year for 1 billion years.
So we are going to strip all that, kill a lot of stuff that might turn out to be important, and then have to use solar or wind.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not renewable in any way.
It was actually only in these last 5 years that we realized, that deep sea scientists realized these nodules are absolutely essential for life in the deep ocean.
Yep.
Organisms need oxygen, just like everywhere else on the planet, even in the deep ocean, but there's no light a mile below this ocean surface, and so there's no photosynthesis. These nodules are generating oxygen through electrolysis, separating the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms in the water to release the oxygen that the whole ecosystem needs down there. Without these nodules, nothing can live in the deep oceans. Back in the 1970s, there was an experimental mining of deep sea nodules off the coast of Norway. And when researchers went back 50 years later, they found there was no life of any kind. There was not even bacteria in that area that was mined. All life on Earth is interconnected. The life of the deep sea is vitally important to the life in the shallow oceans and vice versa. If you sterilize one, the other will collapse. But Trump has ignored this completely and ordered the Marine Minerals Administration, MMA, to immediately begin issuing leases to corporations that want to mine the deep sea nodules. The MMA has announced that it will issue the first lease sale for the waters off the coast of American Samoa in August. Not surprisingly, the people of American Samoa are completely opposed. They're heavily dependent upon the ocean for their food and other resources. The governor of American Samoa, Manu Peleti Mauga, has issued his own executive order declaring a moratorium on deep sea mining. His order cites the threat to biodiversity, habitat destruction, pollution, and disruption of ecological processes. It also emphasizes that these damages would most likely be irreversible. There's no way to fix an ocean bed which has been stripped of its nodules and unable to put oxygen into the water. Imagine running a line like a fish tank down a mile up to do little bubbles in the water.
Yeah, that might not. That sounds like a lot of trouble. You could just leave the oxygen-making machine down there to begin with.
Seems possible. Seems doable. Unfortunately, American Samoa is actually a territory of the United States of America. In other words, we own it. The executive order of the governor of American Samoa would not stand against the executive order of the President of the United States. In fact, the MMA is simply completely ignoring the governor. One other interesting illegal twist on all of this is that the federal government is required to consult with the indigenous populations in places like American Samoa before imposing new federal policies on them. The insult added to this injury is that the MMA is scheduling outreach and public comment for the fall, months after the lease sales. In other words,
Great.
They're just going to do the thing.
Let's stop even pretending that we're going to actually listen to what they say.
Yes.
Let's just not even bother.
Sabrina Suluwai Mahuka, founder of Samoa's Fina Finaus Foundation, says, quote, "We do not want deep sea mining in our waters, yet the federal government is forcing this industry on our communities." If you've ever wondered when you've read historical texts about the terrible things that our federal government has done to indigenous people throughout history, if you've ever wondered how could the people of that time have done such things, this is how. The MMA has announced it's also preparing leased sales for all of the other U.S. Pacific territories. At the same time, the Trump administration is doing something terrible in the Pacific Ocean. It is also blocking something good back here on the mainland. There's a story in Grist on July 13th. The title is "Pointing to Drone Fears, the Pentagon Blocks More Than 150 Wind Projects."
Drone fears? They're gonna, the drones are gonna fly into them? Aren't they programmed not to do that or something?
No, they're like birds. You know? It's the same number of bird deaths. We've reported before about how the Pentagon has simply stopped signing off on wind turbine projects all over the country. When developers are required to get permission from the Pentagon because of the potential for the wind farms to interfere with military radar and activities, they simply don't respond. In the past, this has been a very routine process. Almost every wind farm was improved. In a few cases, there had to be some modifications made, but they weren't difficult. Basically, wind farms are known not to cause any problems. But in the past year, the Pentagon has held up 44 gigawatts worth of wind generation. They have stopped 155 projects in 24 states, and there's been essentially no new wind turbine construction for the past year. Developers have lost over $2 billion so far because of the delays. One important deadline was July 1st. Wind projects had to begin by that date in order to qualify for tax credits that were in Trump's big, ugly budget bill. The Trump administration had used the same tactic to block offshore wind farms. The wind developers sued in federal court. The judge looked at the data provided by the Pentagon and basically said it was ridiculous. That judge struck down the administration's ban on offshore wind. Unfortunately, administration pivoted to simply paying off the wind development companies to give up on their leases. So far this year, the Trump administration has paid $2.6 billion to wind turbine development companies in order to block 11 gigawatts of offshore wind power. That's 11 nuclear power plants worth of electricity that won't be coming onto the grid, even as our grid is facing critical shortages. The onshore wind developers filed a federal lawsuit back in May. The lawsuit says that the Trump administration broke the laws requiring notices for federal rule changes. The Pentagon has responded by saying it's not a change, it's just a delay. Of course, it's an indefinite delay, which looks like it won't have any end date. The Pentagon has refused to say anything about when or if they will ever rescind their blocking pattern.
So kind of a delay, deny, depose type delay.
Ooh, yes. The Pentagon is also alleging that somehow the wind farms are a perfect launching point for attack drones. This is a little ridiculous. Someone should probably tell the Ukrainians this, because as we've reported in past shows, Ukraine is going all in on wind power. The wind farms are much harder to destroy by drone attack or with missiles than conventional energy sources like a single large gas plant or a nuclear power plant. 55 Democrats have sent a weakly worded letter to the Pentagon requesting an explanation on exactly why these permits are being held up and what the specific objections are to the wind turbines.
Send an army of pangolins who walk around like this all the time.
They're very concerned.
Yes.
It's very...
We don't mean to bother you.
The Pentagon has not responded. It's reported that the Democrats are now preparing a strongly worded letter.
Oh my, yeah.
For our final story, we're going back to the theme of people actually making a difference in policy. Cleveland.com on July 21st ran a story titled, "After Backlash, Ohio EPA Drops Its Blanket Wastewater Permit for Data Centers." The Ohio EPA was preparing to issue a blanket permit for all data centers dealing with the wastewater that's created by their cooling systems. Had this permit gone through, every data center would simply have its wastewater dumping plan approved without any kind of individual review. Ohio already has more than 200 data centers. The cooling water they use either comes out of surface waters or gets pumped out of aquifers and becomes contaminated in the process of cooling the plants.
So the plan would then become, well, water runs downhill.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
that's the plan.
So all the
Okay.
PFAS, the metals, the lubricants, the other chemicals, just they'll find their place out there in the world.
And
The OEPA released a draft of the blanket permit. Over 7,000 people from the public responded to the permit draft, saying it should be rejected. There was one quote in the draft permit which went viral. It said, quote, "This was the proposed permit. A lowering of water quality of various waters of the state associated with granting coverage under this permit is necessary to accommodate import, social, and economic development in the state of Ohio. In other words, the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency was saying they weren't going to protect the environment because there was too much money at stake.
Was the social development? We couldn't. We just have a potluck.
Yeah,
You know?
statewide potluck,
Yeah.
middle of the state. That'll make sure
Yeah.
everybody's feels better about losing the ability to drink water.
I guess. Yeah.
On July 21st, the Ohio EPA issued a community notice. It says, public participation is a critical part of Ohio EPA's decision-making process, and we take feedback seriously. And the OEPA has decided not to move forward with the general permit. That means data centers will continue to have to go through the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System.
They will have to
NPDES.
rubber stamp them one by one as God intended. Okay.
It's a victory.
Yeah,
now
it is.
It's true that the OEPA often ignores public sentiment, but this is an election year.
Yeah, good point.
The Republicans who control our state government are feeling pressure for the many anti-environmental policies they've been pushing through, like fracking our state parks. Some Republicans, like Dave Thomas of Ashtabula County, actually came out publicly against the blanket permit, and some Republicans are even running anti-data center campaigns around the state.
And this is the thing people fail to realize about Ohio. Yes, we're a conservative state, but thanks to the magic of gerrymandering, our legislature is several notches more conservative than we are.
Yes.
Actual Ohioans.
And also, remember that this is currently the popular issue.
Yeah.
But Republicans are perfectly capable of lying.
Yeah. It's been known to happen once in a while, I'm just saying.
It is still a victory. Having to go through the national and PDES process will cost data center developers millions of dollars every time they want to build a data center, and hopefully some will even be rejected. We can be a little cynical about why these public comments had such a big impact on this issue, but the fact does remain that they did make a difference.
So thank you to everybody who got off their duff and did that.
7,000 people. That if you're one of the ones that took action on that, we thank you. And
Bravo.
If you're listening and you think, well, I post comments on the internet all the time, that could have been you.
Yeah.
You could have been one of those people. In the novel, The Last Unicorn, Peter S. Beagle wrote about a village where people had seen all the unicorns being driven into the sea, but none of them did anything about it. And at the end of the novel, that village is destroyed. One of the grieving villagers said, "We didn't deserve this. How could we have stopped what happened to the unicorns?" The magician character in the novel answered, "Maybe nothing.
Tried?
But maybe it would have only taken one word to stop it.
Right.
You'll never know because you never tried."
Right.
That's one thing we have to remember with all of these environmental battles. The only certain way to failure is not to try.
Very true.
Thanks again to everyone who is trying. Well, that's it for our show. Thanks to you so much for listening. You can tune back in next week to help us try to save the planet. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
Signing off.
I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun